after this meeting is recording by the participant.
Yeah.
Very well.
Yeah. About, yes, right. I forgot about it. I talked more about it. Yes.
Yeah. But most probably after the war, Ukraine does away with the Russian military on its territory, and that could be called as the end of this war. Certainly, the Ukrainians believe that they will return back Crimea, the peninsula, and those two regions, Donetsk and Lugansk, in the east of their country. And after that, already the secretary of NATO said these days that Ukraine will be accepted as a member country of NATO. Most probably the EU will do the same. And because we are sandwiched between Romania and Ukraine, and Romania is already full right EU and NATO member, they will take us, I don't think with any problems, most probably because of pity they will take us. But certainly Moldova has done a lot of progress. How this direction was chosen, certainly after the collapse, breakup of the Soviet Union in 1991. Already in 1995, Moldova joined the Council of Europe, which is called the fourth chamber, the anti-chamber, the waiting chamber of the EU. And the direction very generally was laid down there. And since then, people try and vote parties who promise that they are pro-Western and they want to integrate into Europe. And in the long run, now we are here we are, waiting for the EU to accept our application. Another question from you: why you asked me why did the Baltics far ahead from us, and also from Ukraine and from Belarus and from Moldova? Well, let me tell you this: the Russians, as you may know, albeit the Tsarist Empire or the Soviet Empire, they, in the territories that they occupy, they conducted a harsh policy of denationalization. I mean, they eradicate the ethnic culture and ethnic languages, first of all. Ukraine has been under the Russians for about 300 years, Moldova 200 years, but the Baltics only 50 years, so to say. The Baltics were occupied before or during or in the beginning of the Second World War, following the agreement between the Soviet Union and Germany and the Nazi Germany. So they managed to preserve their national identity better than the Ukrainians and the Moldovans. And they always, the Baltics, the Estonians, the Latvians, and the Lithuanians, they always knew that they are not Russians. They didn't want to be Russians. And they always had a reluctant, reserved attitude toward everything Soviet or Russian. Culture, again, culture. Besides, their neighbors were Sweden, and the states, the Baltic states in the area. So they immediately didn't have to ponder over what direction should we go to. While Moldova and Ukraine, we were not, people in this country were not very sure what direction to take. For example, after in 2001, the the Moldovans voted for the Communist Party to return to power, and the promise that the communists never accomplished, but the promise that the communists were making then was, we'll give you again the sausage for 2.2 rubles. This was a renowned price for sausages in the Soviet Union, and ordinary people got to that. And we will join the Union of Russia and Belarus. And people, the communists touched the nostalgic feelings of people, especially after the 90s. The 90s, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, was not a dangerous, but frightening decade for Moldova, for all the former Soviet countries, and people were very much afraid of the new times, and they decided what they wanted again to the good times of the Soviet Union, because the Soviet Union gave you a small salary, but it gave you stability. Everybody had work, had a job. Although the wages were small, they were there. And in a way, the Soviet Union managed to make the ordinary people assured that everything is okay. Now, when the capitalism came after the collapse of the Soviet Union, everybody was free to do anything he or she wanted, and many people got richer, but the majority got poorer because they were not accustomed to the way that you guys are very accustomed, because you live in a capitalist country. No offense about that, but you know that you have to take your life in your hands and lead your life. The Soviet people were not accustomed to such a cultural manner. They knew that they were told by the Communist Party, by the mayor, by the priest what to do, by the teacher at school, but not thinking by themselves. Ordinary people, not the intelligentsia or not the intellectuals. Probably, if this is the answer. Another issue, what motivates people to get out in the streets? Well, before the Soviet Union collapse, I would call it a romantic time for Moldova especially, but also for other former Soviet countries. People got into the streets at the call of poets and writers and actors, and it was all very romantic. We are fighting against the Soviet Union, the empire of evil. And the Soviet Union, following such meetings, collapsed in the long run. After that, now when we have free politics here, Moldova now has about 50 parties, registered, recorded parties. I mean, official recorded, you have to register with the government if you want to make a party. No problem with that, but because we have only 3 parties in the parliament, but certainly 50 that do not manage to get into the parliament. Now everybody knows in this country that there are few meetings or rallies that people go by themselves. As a rule, they are paid. And now, even today, yes, today there were protests in Chisinau. They were organized by, I want to tell you the name, but it is a pro-Kremlin, pro-Putin party, and they asked the government to pay for their natural gas bills. Well, it may sound funny, but again, everybody in this country knows that if these people are led by the politicians from that party, that means that these people were paid. I mean, already journalists made a lot of reports where ordinary people didn't know why they came to this rally, but they were pretty sure who was to give the money. Not a big, about 200 lei, that's, let's say, $5 or $10. But it's a good daily allowance for a protester. Yeah. Again,
I have a question, actually. Well,
Yeah.
interrupt. Because I think that this is a question that I have, and I think the other people have asked this as well. You know, when we met, now it's more than a decade ago, we met in Chisinau, and an area that I did not get to because frankly, I didn't have enough time and I was uncertain about it, was the whole Transnistria. And I'm curious if you could describe for us a little bit of what is Transnistria, how does it operate, how do ordinary Moldovans deal with that area that is being occupied essentially? Do you think that will the status of Transnistria will be affected by the outcome of the war in Ukraine?
Yeah. That's an area beyond the Dniester River, as we call it. It is fully supported by Kremlin. I know that the Kremlin, Moscow, even pays their pensions. It is the retributions that the government pays to the retirees, the retired people. Again, that area of Moldova, it has a Russian base there, military base. It has the biggest in Europe, the biggest depot or warehouse of ammunition in that area. After this war, I think something should happen with that area. Because I don't think that Russia will be able to provide all this to those people, and especially will have enough resources to support the military that it has stationed there. You asked me, Mr. Schultz, about democracy there. Democracy there is weak compared to the Moldovan democracy and politics, but better than in Russia. There they have real presidential elections, unlike Russia, where they have where Putin is elected. I don't know for how many times, and again the Russians are going to have elections in 2024, and everybody is pretty much sure that Putin will win those elections again. They do not pose any threat, the military from Transnistria now, and it is very curious that after the start of the war, knowing that the Ukrainian army is very close to them. I mean, Transnistria, if you look at the map, Transnistria is near Odessa, and the Ukraine is holding important military amounts in Odessa, the second or the third city of Ukraine, because because the Transnistrian keep silence. They are very silent and they behave themselves very nicely. I mean, no rumors, even rumors that something bad would have happened there. I mean, that's interesting, but well, interesting, but at the same time, it's explainable. They are afraid of the Ukrainian army, that's the situation there. I think after the end of the war, I don't know how it will happen, but something is going to be with that area, because if after the end of the war Ukraine becomes a NATO member and Moldova too, in a way, something will have to be done about that area. But in my opinion, if Crimea, the Ukrainians don't accept an alternative to returning Crimea and Donbass, I think for this small area of Moldova, which is lived by about 500,000 people, but I think even less now after the COVID. It will have to decide. The politician will have to decide something about this area. No problem so far. They are keeping silence and they are behaving themselves. No problems.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. Well, maybe we have, I know I sent you some questions from the students, and I didn't earlier this morning, I didn't have all the questions, but I want to give our students here a chance to raise their hands and ask you their questions themselves too. So can we get a volunteer? Sure. Yeah, good.
Has Russia done any interference in the past couple of years, especially with what's been going on in Ukraine, in democratic processes and in journalistic processes in Moldova? And does that make your job as a journalist more difficult? Does that make journalism more democratic? Has it affected those things, those processes in Ukraine?
I got it. No, journalism is free to practice here in Moldova. There are no threats. You can report about anything. It's easy to report. I don't think there are any hindrances. But as far as Russia interfering into the Moldovan politics, yes, as I told you, now we have 3 parties in the parliament. There is a threshold that they have to pass over in order to get into the parliament, and that's about 5% of the votes. So if you got, for example, 4% of the voters' ballots, you won't enter the parliament. We have 2 pro-Kremlin parties in the parliament, and 1 pro-Western or pro-European integration party, which is the ruling party. How Russia does that in Moldova is everywhere in Europe or maybe world. They bribe corrupted politicians. So like, for example, the former Chancellor of Germany, Schröder.
Yeah, right.
And there are rumors that even Angela Merkel, there might be an explanation for her good attitude towards Putin. No, probably you know, Berlusconi from Italy, Le Pen from France, the alternative for Deutschland, for Germany in Germany. In Europe, everybody knows that these politicians get money from Putin's special services, now in the past as the KGB and now as the FSB. In Moldova, we had a pro-Russian, pro-Kremlin president and the party and his party till 2020, till November 2020. He was the leader of the Socialist Party, which is still in the parliament. And he was 4 years, he was the president of Moldova. And everybody knows in this country, except for the prosecutors and the judges that have to prosecute him, that he received money from KGB. That's how Russia simple. Russians have a lot of money from selling carbohydrates, natural gas and oil. And with this money, they are doing wars and bribing politicians in Europe.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, so what you're saying is there's a lot of interference directly in the election, and then once the election has happened, bribery continues on pro-Russia officials.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We are going to have local elections. Local, you know what locals mean, not general elections. I mean, people elect their city councils next fall, and we'll see how what is the influence of Russia. Again, I repeat, Chisinau, the city, I mean, the capital city is about 1 million people, and there are 2.6 million people in this country, so we practically know each other by face.
Yeah. Very good. Ellie or Andrea, question?
Okay, is there anything that like we can learn from what's happening in Moldova and the war right now that we can take back into our own lives and like with our country? Or is there anything about like going on in Moldova that's a little bit of a cautionary tale that we should be aware of or things to be on the lookout for that has already happened in Moldova?
Yes, for you guys, you Americans, let me be plain with you. Do not let Trump come to power again. That's the lesson that I have to tell you, because Trump he likes Putin very much. That means that he wants to be like Putin.
Yeah.
And what Putin does, put it simply, he goes and kills people in other countries, and he kills even more people of his. More Russian soldiers were killed in this war than Ukrainian military. So the dictators, they may be liked for being macho and alpha males, but on the other hand, they start wars and people die irrationally in those wars. That's the lesson that you should keep your democracy. When we saw that rally here in Europe on your January the 6th, we were, personally myself, I was more afraid of that rally in Washington that from this war in Ukraine, because if democracy in the United States falls, what is going to happen to this planet? We were a little bit nervous about what are you doing with your country, guys. Again, a question. The biggest threat for Moldova right now is the migration. People from this country having the possibility of working in Western Europe, and the jobs there are better paid. For example, my extended family, I have a cousin working as a builder, as a construction worker in London, not in Chisinau, and his sister is a housemaid in Italy. So actually, Moldova is colonizing Western Europe right now.
I know that part of the story. Yes, yeah, very good. Andrea, you had a question too.
So, obviously, we saw your education and your work experience, right? So how does the invasion in Ukraine has affected you emotionally and like personally? How does that affect you?
Well, objectively, it hasn't affected me in any way. But subjectively, as a man, you feel a little bit, how to say, emotional at the thought that you might be called to the arms, and instead of working as a college teacher, you have to kill people. That's not according to your life plans, actually. You do not, but again, it's your fatherland and also the law.
Yeah.
You cannot escape from doing that if the case is. For example, as it happened to Ukrainian people, not many of them were much willing to go to the front, but there are sometimes situations in this life when there is no other solution.
Right.
Yeah. No, you had a question.
Yeah. So the talk of the past couple of weeks have been spy balloons, and I noticed that Moldova has recently closed their airspace due to a spy balloon. What are your thoughts on those? Are you concerned about them at all?
Moldova closed the airspace. You said about spies?
Spy balloon.
The balloons, the whole,
The balloons. I know that there were some balloons, but so far I have not read any information from the government. What was the matter with those balloons? On the other hand, Moldova is such a small territory that maybe the Ukrainians have an answer to that. At least I know, guys, that in your country those Chinese balloons were made a lot of scandal, but I don't know. We have bigger problems here than the aliens, than the aliens and the balloons. I don't know. In a way, I did not much attention was paid to the balloons.
yeah.
I mean, you had mentioned that Russia was literally shooting missiles over your country into Ukraine. At least I thought you had mentioned that. So like that seems like a much larger concern. And also like it would do a pretty good job clearing out anything else that's out there.
Well,
I'm sorry to say that I haven't understood very well your question. Could you repeat it?
Oh, I thought you had said earlier that Russia was shooting missiles over your country into Ukraine. And that seems like a greater concern, and also like it might potentially clear out anything else that is flying up there.
sort of a joke, shutka.
Joke. Well,
Mala, you have a question.
What was the Moldovan government like before the Soviet Union collapsed, and how has it changed since the 90s?
Wow.
very simple. During the Soviet Union, the government was appointed from Moscow, and now it is generated by the parliament. And by the way, guys, there were some questions about the cabinet or government in Moldova. Several hours we already have a new government. After a week ago about that one fell, or at least was well, it's like reshuffling the cabinet. And another prime minister, and again the government now are voted democratically by the parties in power with the majority in the parliament. Our parliament is 101 seats has, and if this ruling party, I also want to tell you that basically what I told you, basically the key voters in Moldova are the so-called the pro-Westerners, and that's the teachers and the pensioners or the retirees. So the teachers and the doctors vote for pro-Western, pro-European parties, and the pensioners, the elderly, vote for pro-Kremlin parties, and also the poor ones also vote for the pro-Kremlin parties. That's well, you have 200 years of democracy and have two parties. We have 30 years of democracy and have three parties in the parliament. Germany even has more parties in its parliament. So that's the situation.
Yeah. And you know, this is a class where we talk a lot about how the different structures of government work and how they affect what comes out of as far as policies. This is very, very pertinent what you're talking about, the structure. Tanya, you had some good questions, as I recall.
Yeah, so the one that I'm gonna ask is with the Prime Minister, Natalie, I think I'm pronouncing that right. Resigning from her position, like what are your opinions on that, and how do you think it will impact Moldova for the better or worse?
What is the impact of the resignation of the Prime Minister?
Absolutely no impact. Let me tell you just the beginning. Let me a quote from the beginning of a Facebook post by the new Prime Minister. He or our team is going to implement the political programs or platforms of the president of the country and of the ruling party. So I mean, if my neighbor is changing his furniture in his apartment. What problem can I have with that? It's his will. The ruling party, that's what counts. Moldova is a parliamentary democracy, and the ruling party decides. Now it happens that the president of the country and the ruling party are people from the same party. They are kind of liberal Democrats, but well, it doesn't tell you much. They are pro-Western. Actually, it is the same components, or the same people were voted again in the new government. Only the prime minister was changed, and 2 or 3 ministers. And the interesting point is that these people were people about whom most of the memes on Facebook or on social media were made about. I mean, the jokes. I mean, the president, we have a female president, changed the people who were most notorious for their lack of intelligence, should I put it. And that's why people were making jokes about them. And now she changed the people making who generated jokes, and now, okay, let's see. Not any change. I mean, our way is towards, the EU, the European Union, has posed an agenda or a set of tasks that Moldova is going to accomplish in order to be accepted or to get nearer the EU standards. And this government is insisting, is working on accomplishing those tasks.
Interesting. Mark, you have a question still.
Yeah, my question is, what are your thoughts on the proposed unification of Moldova and Romania? Do you think this is something that's realistic? Does this have significant support within Moldova?
Yeah. No. Because, for example, how do I know? For example, in the parliament, there is no unionist party. I mean, there are several, at least 5 I can count quickly right now. Unionist, as we call them, Partide Unioniste, unionist party in Moldova. But I don't know why. I mean, I know why. They do not get into the parliament, although they are participating in elections. It's a strange. I mean, I consider myself Romanian because I speak Romanian as my native language, and we are Romanians with the Moldovans. The Moldovans are a Romanian tribe in the long run. Well, now we do not live in tribes, but again, for example, I think that should Russia decide to attack us, will demand the Bucharest that we join them on the spot immediately. But since nobody is threatening us, there is no much need. I mean, I live in Chisinau. I have my agenda. The thought of getting united with Romania is not on my agenda. Although I know that people learn at their history classes that these were once one country, and we have the same culture, and we have the same literature, and we have the same classic writers from the 19th centuries. Yes, and we are Romanians, but I don't know. I don't feel like a strong urge to join the other country. There are countries speaking the same language, for example, the US and Canada. Nobody thinks of joining Australia and New Zealand. People speak the same language, so what? In ancient Greece, there were 100 cities that spoke the same language and even worship the same gods, and they did not think of joining together.
Okay, good point. Good point. Abby, do you have a question? No questions, okay. Yeah, we got more for Elliot.
Going back to what Molly asked, when you talked about Moldova transitioning governments, how fragile was Moldova during that week-long period between transitioning from one government to another? And how fragile was Moldova, like, before that transition? Did Moldova become more fragile or did they become stronger?
You mean between the prime minister with the?
Yes.
I mean, after this change of prime minister, is
Beforehand.
that what you mean?
Beforehand.
Well, as Mr. Schwartz sent me some questions, there was a mention that could Moldova become a failed state? No, because Moldova is already a failed state, and it cannot turn for worse. I mean, all it can do is to go up and improve itself, and we're doing that together with the European Union. Don't know if I answered your question.
I think, yeah, I think she was asking about the fragility. I think the question has to do with the fragility of democracy within Moldova, and what is your account of how fragile is it?
Well, first of all, I don't think that you should put in the same line the words Moldova and strong or strength. But about the fragility of democracy, you know, I think that Moldova is keeping being democratic because there is no, our political parties are like Scottish clans. No clan is strong enough to get all the power in this country. And people are afraid, people from one party are afraid of protests from other parties. So if nobody is strong enough to grab all the power, I mean the judiciary, the government, the parliament, and well, that's pretty, these are the branches. So that's why they have to observe the democracy, because, you know, if a party wins after some elections, the other parties have to recognize their victory. And there were, especially in the former decade, there were many times when after the elections, the losing parties were asking for the ballots to be recounted. And this procedure went on and on for several elections until people in this country understood that you have to behave yourself, correctly during the electoral campaigns, because your enemies should recognize the victory. So that's why Moldova is, in a way, well, as I told you, that's why Moldova keeps being democratic. Nobody is strong enough to win all the other ones.
Interesting point. You know, I was remembering, Daniel, when we met, and I was traveling and interviewing different, you know, a lot of journalists, but one of the things that was one of the reasons that Moldova had been in the news was about the so-called Twitter revolution that happened.
Yeah.
The uprising that was spurred by, actually organized by Twitter users that forced, they literally forced out the government. Now it was not an easy, it was not like that was a path to democracy, but I'm wondering if you could comment on the impact of social media on democratic processes as it stands in Moldova, from what you observe.
Yeah, and especially now the social media have even a bigger impact than in 2009 when the so-called Twitter revolution happened here. Again, that revolution happened because the communists who were in power for two terms in turn, they again won the elections, and that's why other parties started to bring to the central piazza or plaza or in the central square their people in order to protest. How could that happen, that the communists kept on winning? And that's why those protests happened. Now we learn that they were also supported by FSB agents from Russia. I don't know if they were then agents or they became agents later. But again, it was not done without Russia's influence. What was Russia's interest? I don't know. Probably Russia doesn't want to put all its eggs into one basket, and that's why it supported the another party, not the communists, who protests happened. 1 or 3 people died. There were there have never been made satisfactory or satisfying police investigations on those events, and it is already 14 years ago, and kind of everybody forgot. But now the social media have a big impact because, for example, this new prime minister, who is not he is already prime minister, because they have to swear on the constitution in the presence of the president, and they already did that procedure. That means that we have a full-fledged cabinet. He or his team already published on the Facebook everything that happened today in the parliament, and his speeches and everything, photos and everything. I mean, I don't think those pictures were on Moldovan TVs. The TVs will show those reports in their evening news hours.
Right.
Yes.
So it's already the communication. The communication is a lot of it is over the social media. Is Facebook dominant, or is it Twitter, or what social media platform is dominant?
Probably, as in your country, Facebook for people after 40 or above 40, Instagram for girls in bikinis, and the TikTok for teenagers who like to dance. That's how it is here.
Yeah, that's about like what it is here too. Yeah. Other questions. I know we've got a lot of questions here. Mark?
I read that the third president of Moldova, Vladimir Voronin, he was a communist, and he was democratically elected. Were the years of his rule in any way similar to life in the Moldovan Socialist Republic under the Soviet rule?
So what was the difference?
No.
Or was he like just communist in name?
No.
Really?
Now he took this trademark communist because it was popular in Moldova, and it triggered nostalgic feelings within people. People lived okay under the Soviet communists, or at least compared with the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why he took this trademark communist. It was nothing communistic about him. When he was in power for 4 years, the joke in Moldova was that only his son was working in this country, meaning that his son was responsible for a lot of businesses in this country, and he used to take businesses from other businessmen, mafia style. Actually, he was a gangster. But communist, no. Only he took, like, Coca-Cola is a good brand. Everybody likes to drink it. Here in Moldova and in your country, certainly too. No. Again, social media were free. Everybody was free to say whatever they wanted. He was not about, although he promised the sausage for 2.2 rubles. Actually, he took or used these 2 terms in office to enrich his family. And his son was a big banker. Now his son, I don't know, I think his son is jobless now. But then when he was a big banker when his father was the president. Bank, I mean, working, or possessing, or owning a important bank.
Yeah,
Sounds
yeah,
like the opposite of it.
very good point, very good point. Other questions? Molly, you have another question? I know you do.
Do you think Moldova is moving in a positive or negative direction considering the state of the Ukrainian war?
Well, I feel that the direction is positive, and everybody in this region look forward for the end of this war, because after that, Ukraine will be accepted into NATO and the EU, and they are going to do something about us too.
Yeah,
Nothing bad could happen to us.
very good point, very good point. No, you,
Yeah. So, here in the US, people tend to vote, Democrat. So I guess Western, for Moldova, if they like live in highly populated areas, urban areas, and then vote Republican or pro-Kremlin, if they live in like, rural areas, is that like kind of the same in Moldova?
No.
yeah,
No. As I told you, the program are the retired people, the retirees, people who, you know, how do you call them in your country?
yeah, retired, yeah,
They're retired, the pensioners who
yeah,
are getting pensions from the state. They are the pro-Kremlin, and also the very poor, the
Yeah.
people who are jobless because they don't want to work. There is such a category in every country. While the pro-Western are the teachers, the doctors, the government, small functionaries, clerks, officials. And now these, but not, it is not separated by urban and rural. It is mostly separated by age and by language, by ethnicity. As a rule, the Russian speakers vote for the pro-Kremlin parties.
yeah.
And the Romanian speakers vote for the pro-Western parties.
Right, right. You know, we were just, in our last class, we were talking about East Germany and about the change of government in East Germany going back to 1989 and the fall of the Berlin Wall. We talked a little bit about the Stasi and the role of repression in keeping, you know, the status quo. What was it like before in Moldova, before the what was the role of the KGB? And because I think a lot of times people who are Americans who haven't lived in that situation don't really understand. I remember when I was traveling through that area and going to Romania and talking to Romanian journalists about what it was really like to live under Ceausescu, for example. And it's hard for us even, you couldn't have a radio. Having a radio would land you in prison. What was what was it like in Moldova?
The same. When you were wording your question, radio came the first to my mind. Yes, if KGB or KGB agents learned that you are listening to foreign stations like Voice of America in Romanian, Russian, and all the German radio, the French radio, the BBC, certainly they had programs in Romanian and the Russian. If you had problems with the KGB, another issue was if you were insisting on speaking your native tongue in street, or in a way you behave like what the KGB formulated as nationalistic. You were also you had problems with the KGB. After the Soviet Union occupied this territory in 1940, that was after the World War II. World War II started in 39, and in 1940, Stalin occupied this territory together with the Baltics. They changed the Romanian to Russian letters. I mean, Romanian naturally is written with Latin letters, like English. And they changed, and if well, God forbid, if the KGB found that you were writing in Romanian or Moldovan, as they used to call it, with Latin script, you had problems with the KGB. And usually, yes, they deported immediately after the war ended. They deported a lot of people to Siberia. You may know it from history. And they deported, namely, the well-to-do, the richer peasants. I mean, there were no like big rich people in this area then. But anyway, there were people who were considered rich if they had 3 cows,
Yeah.
2 horses,
Yeah.
or the teachers, or the priests, people who knew to write and to read. Stalin deported them to Siberia. Some of them managed to run into Romania. And this is the first wave. There were several ones of this nationalization. They killed everything ethnic about Romanians, and the Baltics too, and the Ukrainians too, the Georgians, the Chechens, all the ethnicities in this Soviet area.
Yeah, so it's hard, I think, for people who haven't traveled there to even get an idea, the scope, how much was done in that way. I have a question.
Just to add, Russians are very good at erasing other people's culture. They start by erasing their writers, their language, and that's pretty well. After that, you got them. Please.
Yeah, no, and it reminds of, it brings it back to Ukraine, unfortunately. I have a question, completely might seem off the wall, but I'm just curious. I remember when I was living in Russia the first time, that Moldova Moldova and Georgia were the best wine producers. I was living in St. Petersburg. If you wanted wine, it was Moldovan wine, famous for their vegetables and their wine industry. Is that still the case? What is Moldova known for? As far as
that's wine, and that's from the time of Julius Caesar. Moldova, or this area is renowned for its wine. Maybe if you lived in Russia, maybe you know that Gorbachev decided to eradicate alcoholism.
Of course, yes. Yeah.
And it made the Moldovans to cut their vineyards.
Yeah.
Which, as you may understand, is like your pet. For a Moldovan. But Gorbachev was not the first. During Julius Caesar, at that time before Jesus Christ, ruler of Dacia, he was the first to cut the vineyards, actually. So the problem with wine here is 2,000 years old. And yes, Moldova is known for its good wines. I don't know why. The climate is hot and dry, and it is good for grapes to make good wine. But again, Moldova has a reputation for its agriculture. We have other foods, but the paradox is that although despite all that, the IT is an economic branch which brings more money to the state budget than agriculture.
Really, IT?
Yeah, the IT is much more than tourism or agriculture, and I don't know why IT, and it keeps growing, geometrically increasing year by year.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we are more like an IT country than an agricultural country.
Reminds me of Estonia. Estonia is a very big IT country. Forrest, you have a question.
So you were talking about how the different language groups, folks who speak Russian or speak Romanian, differ in terms of what parties they tend to vote for. How does the multilingual nature of Moldova affect the way media functions and affect the way laws are written and interpreted in the country?
In media, for example, the TV stations, some of them decide to broadcast into both languages, Romanian and Russian. And as a rule, well, they used to broadcast about 3 hours in Romanian and 1 hour in Russia. That was the proportion of the TV stations broadcasting permanently news and so to say serious material, news and political analysis, let's say so, current affairs. There are TV stations that show films. They are obliged to subtitle them. And everything is subtitled. If you have subtitles, either if the broadcast is in Russian, it has subtitles in Romanian. That's compulsorily by law. But if the program is in Romanian, you do not have to subtitle it unless you want the Russian speakers to understand what the talk is about. No problem on the street. I mean, in my public transport, at my supermarkets, I speak Romanian, no problem. I don't know. There are maybe some neighbors that just came from Transnistria, because in Chisinau it is better to live than in Transnistria, and they bought apartments in my block, and sometimes I speak several words with them in Russian. But again, Russian is disappearing in this country. English, I teach students like you, which are 16, 18 years old, they don't speak Russian any longer if they are not from a Russian family. They speak English instead.
Yeah. Interesting. You know, I taught, after we met, I taught for a couple of years in Azerbaijan, and I would lecture in Russian and then have that translated into Azerbaijani, because the young people didn't speak Russian, you know, not in some places, but the people over 40, you know, over 50 maybe, yes, but the 18-year-olds, no.
The same here. The same is occurring here, is happening here right now.
Yeah.
I'm witnessing this phenomenon.
Yeah, interesting. So last question here. Yeah, Andre.
So my question is, so we saw your, like I said, we saw your education and your work all over the years. So what would you consider to be the most valuable lesson that you have learned, like from your first job to your current job?
Lesson from my jobs, didn't think about that. I'm just doing my jobs. I'm not doing lessons. I will tell you a value in life that I have, because as you guys, I also finished the university twice. I mean, 2 faculties. Education is the most valuable value. And now I envy you, because you are taking exams and I do not have to take exams. I have to receive exams from other students. That's why I'm envious of you, because I want to give exams. I want to go to pass exams, to prepare for them.
Interesting. Okay.
It's Aristotle who says, probably in his Nicomachean Ethics, that curiosity is a thing that's well, in some of his books, Aristotle says that curiosity is a natural, that feeling that people are going with it.
Yeah.
So education.
Yes, education, and it's good that, you know, it's interesting that we both we made that transition from journalist to educator. I don't think we're the only ones in that way. So,
yeah.
I got tired of chasing after fire engines. So, well, I appreciate your time. Daniel, thanks so much for showing up, coming all the way to Maryland, and please contact me if you take a vacation to the United States sometime.
Okay.
And I will let you know
Okay.
next time I go traveling in Moldova, which that probably it's not going to happen before the end of the war in Ukraine, but God willing, that will be soon.
Okay, please
Okay,
give me a Facebook call.
okay.
Yeah, thank you very
good.
much. It was
Okay.
also very interesting for me to talk to you guys and your professor.
Thank
Okay,
you.
very
Thank you
good.
much.
Je suis
Thank
d'accord.
you.
Au revoir.
Goodbye. Au revoir.
Well,